September 15th, 1940, 11:30 in the morning, 22,000 feet above the Thames estuary, Hauptmann Horst Tietzen banked his Messerschmitt 109 into a steep turn, scanning the sky below for the British fighters he'd been told would be easy meat. As commander of the 2nd Gruppe of Jagdgeschwader 51, he'd spent the past month listening to Luftwaffe intelligence officers describe the Hurricane as obsolete, underpowered, and outmatched by German fighters in every measurable way. What Tietzen saw instead made his blood run cold. 4 Hurricanes climbing toward him in perfect formation, not running, not diving away, but turning to meet his attack head-on. Before he could react, the lead Hurricane opened fire at 300 yards. The 8 Browning machine guns spoke as one. Tietzen watched his wingman's 109 simply disintegrate, the fuselage shredding like paper, as 100 rounds per second found their mark. He dove away, abandoning the attack, his hands trembling on the controls. Back at Wissant Airfield in France, he would write in his combat diary words that contradicted everything Luftwaffe High Command believed about British fighters. The Hurricane is not obsolete. It is a killer. Our intelligence is dangerously wrong. By the time the Battle of Britain ended 2 months later, Hurricanes would account for more German aircraft destroyed than all other British defenses combined. Not Spitfires, not anti-aircraft guns, but the supposedly inferior Hurricane. The fighter the Luftwaffe had dismissed would shoot down 2,400 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter during the entire war. This is the story of how German arrogance met British determination, and how a stubborn, fabric-covered fighter proved that sometimes the winner isn't the one with the best specifications on paper, but the one that shows up ready to fight. The Hurricane entered service with the Royal Air Force in December 1937, making it Britain's first monoplane fighter. Its designer, Sidney Cam, had created something revolutionary yet practical. While other nations chased raw performance, Cam designed for mass production and combat survival. The result was a fighter that could be built quickly, repaired easily, and flown by average pilots. Everything about the Hurricane's design emphasized durability over delicacy. The fuselage was built around a framework of steel tubes covered in fabric, exactly like the biplanes that came before it. Modern German fighters used stressed aluminum skin that made them lighter and faster, but also fragile. A single cannon shell could cause catastrophic structural failure. The Hurricane's old-fashioned construction made it nearly indestructible. Pilots discovered they could land with half the tail shot away. They returned from combat with holes you could put your fist through. The fabric could be patched with doped linen. The steel tubes could be straightened and welded. Damaged Hurricanes were back in the air within hours, while Messerschmitts sat in workshops for weeks. The Hurricane's 8 Browning 303 machine guns represented another British innovation. While most fighters carried 2 or 4 guns, Hurricane designers realized that future air combat would happen at high speeds, where engagement windows lasted only seconds. 8 guns firing together put out an incredible 11,000 rounds per minute. At convergence range, usually set at 250 yards, a 2-second burst put 300 bullets into a space the size of a dinner table. German pilots called it the Hurricane's Wall of Lead. Squadron leader Peter Townsend, who would become one of the Battle of Britain's leading aces, described his first combat sortie in a Hurricane over Dunkirk in May 1940. He'd been told the Messerschmitt 109 was faster, climbed better, and turned tighter than his Hurricane. When he encountered 4 109s attacking Spitfires, he ignored the intelligence reports and did what British pilots did best. He attacked. Townsend's combat report was clinical. Closed to 150 yards on enemy number 2. Fired 3-second burst. Enemy aircraft exploded. No time to observe further as engaged enemy number 3. The Hurricane had put nearly 500 rounds into the Messerschmitt in 3 seconds. The German fighter hadn't just been shot down, it had been obliterated. By June 1940, the Hurricane equipped 32 RAF squadrons, while the glamorous Spitfire equipped only 19. This numerical advantage wasn't an accident. It was the result of Sidney Cam's genius for practical engineering. A Hurricane could be built in 10,000 man-hours. A Spitfire required 15,000. Hawker Aircraft's factories were producing Hurricanes faster than the Air Ministry could train pilots to fly them. When France fell and Britain stood alone, This production advantage would prove decisive. The Luftwaffe's assessment of the Hurricane came from combat over France during May and June 1940. German intelligence reports noted the Hurricane's lower top speed compared to the Messerschmitt 109, 320 miles per hour versus 350. They observed its less impressive rate of climb, 2,600 feet per minute versus 3,100. They concluded the Hurricane was inferior in every meaningful category. What they failed to understand was that air combat wasn't won by the best specifications. It was won by the fighter that could get to the right place at the right time and put bullets into the enemy. The Battle of Britain officially began on July 10, 1940. Though German aircraft had been probing British defenses for weeks, the Luftwaffe's strategy was simple and logical. Destroy fighter command on the ground and in the air. Once the RAF was eliminated, invasion could proceed. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, believed he needed 4 days, 4 weeks at most. His intelligence officers assured him British fighter strength was already broken after the losses in France. They were catastrophically wrong. Fighter command had lost 261 Hurricanes and Spitfires in France, but British factories had already replaced them twice over. By early July, fighter command possessed more fighters than when France fell. The Germans didn't know this. They were about to learn it the hard way. July 13, 1940. A large formation of Junkers 87 Stuka dive bombers approached Portland on the south coast, escorted by Messerschmitt 109s. The Stukas were the Luftwaffe's precision weapon, capable of destroying ships and ground targets with terrifying accuracy. They'd never been intercepted by significant fighter opposition. That was about to change. Squadron leader James Leithart led 6 Hurricanes of 873 Squadron into the formation from above. The German pilots barely had time to react. Leithart selected the lead Stuka and opened fire at 200 yards. His combat report noted that the Stuka broke into pieces and fell into the sea. His wingman destroyed a second. Another Hurricane pilot got a third. In less than 2 minutes, the precise formation of Stukas was scattered chaos, with burning aircraft spinning into the channel. The escorting Messerschmitts dove to help, but the Hurricanes had already climbed away. One German pilot, Lieutenant Julius Meimberg of Jagdgeschwader 26, later wrote in his diary about the encounter, "The British fighters appeared from nowhere. They were slower than us, yes, but they were already in position. By the time we could react, 3 Stukas were gone. The Hurricane pilots knew exactly what they were doing." What Meimberg had witnessed was the beginning of a tactical revolution. Fighter command had developed a carefully coordinated defense system. Radar stations along the coast detected incoming raids while they were still over France. Sector controllers directed fighters to optimal interception positions. The Hurricanes didn't need to be faster than German fighters. They just needed to be where the bombers were. And they were equipped with enough firepower to destroy bombers with a single burst. The Germans hadn't planned for this. They'd assumed British fighters would be rare, timid, and easily swept aside. Instead, Hurricanes appeared everywhere, attacking with precision and confidence. German bomber crews began requesting stronger fighter escorts. The 109s had to stay close to the bombers instead of roaming freely. This negated their speed advantage. They were fighting the Hurricanes' battle now, not their own. Flight Lieutenant Robert Stanford Tuck of 257 Squadron exemplified the new breed of Hurricane pilot. A former merchant seaman who joined the RAF in 1935, Tuck treated air combat like a naval gunnery problem. Get close, aim carefully, fire short bursts, confirm the kill. On July 24th, he demonstrated this approach against a formation of Dornier 17 bombers over Dover. Tuck positioned his Hurricane directly astern of the lead Dornier at 100 yards, so close he could see the rear gunner's face. He fired a 2-second burst that killed the gunner and set the starboard engine ablaze. As the Dornier fell away, Tuck was already lining up the second bomber. Another burst, another engine fire. The third Dornier tried to evade, but Tuck followed it down to 500 feet, firing until it crashed into a field near Folkestone. 3 bombers destroyed in less than 4 minutes. The Luftwaffe's response was to increase fighter escorts and send them in at higher altitudes. The Messerschmitts would come in first at 25,000 feet, trying to draw off British fighters. Then the bombers would follow at 15,000 feet with close escort. It was a good plan. It didn't work. Fighter Command simply sent Spitfires to deal with the high-altitude escort, while Hurricanes went straight for the bombers. The Hurricanes were perfect for this role. Stable gun platforms, heavy firepower, rugged enough to survive return fire from bomber gunners. German bomber crews began to dread the Hurricane. It was slower than their escorts, less glamorous than the Spitfire, but it was the one that actually killed them. Obergefreiter Hans Schaub, a dorsal gunner on a Heinkel 111, survived being shot down on August 8th. His interrogation report revealed the psychological impact. We could outrun Hurricanes in level flight, but they were always there when we reached the target. Our fighters couldn't stay with us due to fuel. The Hurricanes had no such problem. They would sit behind us at 200 meters and simply shoot us apart. The 8 machine guns sounded like tearing cloth. When you heard that sound, men died. August 13th, 1940. The Luftwaffe launched Adlertag, Eagle Day, the beginning of the campaign to destroy Fighter Command. Göring committed nearly 1,500 aircraft. The plan called for attacks on radar stations, airfields, and aircraft factories. If everything went perfectly, Fighter Command would be crippled within 48 hours. Nothing went perfectly. The day began with German bombers attacking airfields in Kent and Hampshire. Hurricane squadrons scrambled to meet them. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson of 249 Squadron was climbing to intercept Junkers 88s near Southampton when his Hurricane was hit by cannon fire from a Messerschmitt 109 he never saw. Shells exploded in his cockpit. His instrument panel shattered. Glycol from the cooling system sprayed across the windscreen. The fuel tank behind the engine erupted in flames. Any rational pilot would have bailed out immediately. Nicholson didn't. Through the flames, he spotted a Junkers 88 directly ahead. He ignored the fire consuming his cockpit and opened fire. The bomber's starboard engine exploded. The wing folded. The Junkers went down. Only then did Nicholson roll the Hurricane inverted and drop out. He landed by parachute with severe burns to his hands and face. He'd stayed in a burning aircraft to kill one more German bomber. For this action, he received the Victoria Cross, the only fighter pilot in the Battle of Britain so honored. Nicholson's determination was typical of Hurricane pilots that summer. They understood the mathematics of survival. Britain had 1,800 fighters. Germany had 3,500. British factories could replace aircraft. They were producing 500 fighters monthly by August. But pilot losses were irreplaceable in the short term. Training new pilots took 6 months. Fighter Command had perhaps 1,400 combat-ready pilots. Every German bomber that reached London meant civilian deaths. Every German fighter that survived meant another day of combat. The Hurricane squadrons fought with desperate mathematics driving every decision. August 15th, 1940 became the Luftwaffe's heaviest defeat. They launched 3 major raids, 1 from Norway against the northeast, 2 from France and Belgium against the south. Nearly 1,800 aircraft committed. Fighter Command met them everywhere. Hurricane squadrons from 13 Group in the north intercepted the Norwegian raid. The Germans had assumed northern England would be undefended. They assumed wrong. Squadron leader Douglas Bader, commanding 242 Squadron, led 12 Hurricanes into a formation of 65 Heinkel 111s and Junkers 88s over the Yorkshire coast. Bader had lost both legs in a flying accident before the war. The RAF had initially invalidated him out. He'd fought his way back to active duty through sheer determination. Now he was about to demonstrate why that determination mattered. Bader positioned his Hurricanes between the bombers and their fighter escort, forcing the Messerschmitt 110s to choose between protecting the bombers or engaging the Hurricanes. While the German fighters hesitated, Bader's pilots tore into the bomber formation. The Hurricane's 8-gun battery was devastating at close range. Bader himself destroyed a Heinkel with a 3-second burst that killed the crew and set both engines ablaze. His squadron claimed 7 bombers destroyed without loss. The southern raids fared no better. Every Hurricane squadron in 11 groups scrambled. The sky over Kent became a chaotic melee of burning aircraft and parachutes. Pilot Officer Bob Doe of 238 Squadron shot down 2 Messerschmitt 109s and a Junkers 88 before his Hurricane was damaged by return fire. He crash-landed at Hawkinge with his engine seized and half his port wing shot away. The ground crew counted 97 bullet holes. They patched them with fabric and doped linen. The Hurricane was flying again by evening. That single day cost the Luftwaffe 75 aircraft destroyed, Fighter Command lost 34, mostly Hurricanes, but the Hurricanes could be replaced overnight. The trained German bomber crews could not. More significantly, every attacking formation had been intercepted. None had reached their targets unscathed. Goering's plan for quick victory was unraveling. The true test came in the last week of August and first week of September. The Luftwaffe shifted strategy. Instead of attacking a wide variety of targets, they focused on Fighter Command sector airfields, Biggin Hill, Kenley, Hornchurch, the fields where fighters took off and landed. If these could be destroyed, Fighter Command would be paralyzed regardless of how many aircraft they had. For 2 weeks, the airfields were pounded daily. Hurricanes operated from cratered runways. Pilots slept in dispersed billets, ready to scramble at any moment. Ground crews repaired battle damage between raids. Some squadrons flew 5 or 6 sorties daily. Pilot exhaustion became critical. Squadron commanders watched men fall asleep at the dinner table. Some pilots were so tired they crashed on landing simply from exhaustion. Flight Lieutenant Brian Lane of 19 Squadron kept a detailed diary that summer. His entry for September 2nd captured the desperate intensity. 4 sorties today. Morning. Intercepted Dorniers over Maidstone. Shot down 1 confirmed. Lunchtime. Scrambled to deal with fighter sweep. No contact. Afternoon. Caught Heinkels bombing Biggin Hill. Got 1 probable. Evening. Bounced by 109s at 20,000 feet. Thompson didn't come back. We're down to 9 serviceable aircraft and 11 pilots. How much longer can we keep this up? The answer came on September 7th, 1940. The Luftwaffe made its final strategic mistake. They stopped attacking the airfields and began bombing London. Hitler had ordered the change in retaliation for RAF raids on Berlin. Goering supported it, believing concentrated attacks on the capital would force Fighter Command to commit everything. They would destroy the RAF in decisive battle over London. This decision saved Fighter Command. The battered sector airfields got respite. Repair crews worked around the clock to fill craters and rebuild operations rooms. Fighter squadrons pulled back to rest and refit. When the Luftwaffe came for London on September 7th, Fighter Command was ready. And waiting with them were 19 Hurricane squadrons, angry, experienced, and loaded for bear. September 15th, 1940. The day began with morning mist across southern England. By 9 o'clock, the mist had cleared. Radar stations reported massive formations building over France. Every available fighter was scrambled. 23 squadrons took to the air, 14 of them flying Hurricanes. This would be the largest single day of combat in the Battle of Britain. The first wave came in at 11 in the morning, over 400 aircraft, including more than 200 bombers. Park's 11 Group committed every fighter. Hurricane squadrons from 12 Group in the Midlands raced south to help. The Germans expected to fight their way through scattered resistance. Instead, they found Hurricanes everywhere. Squadron leader Douglas Bader was leading what he called his Big Wing. 3 Hurricane squadrons and 2 Spitfire squadrons flying together, 60 fighters in formation. The idea was controversial. Some commanders thought large formations were too slow to organize. Bader proved them wrong. When he spotted the German formation over South London, he had 60 fighters perfectly positioned for a stern attack on the bombers. The Hurricane squadrons went in first. 242 Squadron took the left flank. 310 Squadron hit the right. 616 Squadron attacked from directly astern. In the space of 2 minutes, the tight German formation exploded into chaos. Dornier 17s and Heinkel 111s scattered in every direction seeking safety in clouds. They found only more Hurricanes. Flight Lieutenant Eric Ball of 616 Squadron described the attack. "We came at them from out of the sun. They never saw us until we opened fire. I selected a Dornier on the left of the formation. 2-second burst. The starboard engine caught fire immediately. I pulled up, selected another, fired again. Both engines this time. It went down in a spin. The whole sky was full of burning bombers. I'd never seen anything like it. Complete destruction." The German fighter escort tried to intervene, but Bader had positioned his Spitfires to keep them busy. The Messerschmitt 109s found themselves in dogfights at 20,000 feet, while Hurricanes slaughtered the bombers below. By the time German fighters broke free, much of the damage was done. 20 bombers destroyed or so badly damaged they'd never reach France. The second wave came in the afternoon. Another massive formation, this one approaching from the southeast. Fighter Command had barely 90 minutes to refuel and rearm. Hurricane squadrons that had fought in the morning scrambled again. Some pilots flew 3 times that day. The Germans expected exhausted opposition. They got a wall of fighters that seemed impossibly numerous. This was the secret of Fighter Command's success. The same squadrons appeared again and again. German intelligence counted squadron numbers and estimated British strength as much higher than it actually was. In reality, Fighter Command was flying the same tired pilots over and over, but the Germans didn't know that. They saw hurricanes everywhere and assumed the RAF was still at full strength. Squadron leader Richard Hope of 600 Squadron caught the second wave over Maidstone. His Hurricane had been repaired twice that morning after earlier damage. He led 9 fighters against a formation of 60 bombers and 30 escorts. Hope's tactical report noted simply, "We could not hope to stop them all, so we concentrated on destroying as many bombers as possible before they reached London." The Hurricanes dove through the escort, absorbed the Messerschmitt's first attacks, and pressed on to the bombers. Hope himself destroyed 2 Dornier 17s before his Hurricane took cannon hits that wounded him in the leg and shoulder. He stayed in the fight, shooting down a Messerschmitt 110 before finally breaking off. His Hurricane crash-landed at Gravesend. Hope was back flying within a week. By day's end, the Luftwaffe had lost 56 aircraft destroyed and another 70 damaged beyond immediate repair. Fighter Command lost 29 fighters, but most of the pilots survived. The kill ratio was nearly 2-1 in Britain's favor. More importantly, German morale was shattered. They'd committed everything and been met by opposition that seemed endless. Luftwaffe bomber crews began refusing missions. Fighter pilots reported extremely aggressive British tactics. The word hurricane appeared in German combat reports with increasing frequency, often accompanied by descriptions like extremely dangerous and devastating firepower. Feldwebel Heinz Lange, a dorsal gunner who survived 3 separate missions over England, was shot down on September 15th. His interrogation report revealed the German perspective. "We were told British fighter strength was nearly exhausted. Instead, every mission brought more fighters. The Hurricanes were the worst. They ignored our escorts and came straight for us. Their 8 machine guns could cut a bomber in half. We lost 3 from our staffel that day, all to Hurricanes. When we saw Spitfires, we felt we could fight. When we saw Hurricanes, we knew someone was about to die." October 1940 saw the Battle of Britain wind down. The Luftwaffe switched to night bombing, acknowledging they could no longer operate in daylight without unacceptable losses. Hitler postponed the invasion indefinitely. Britain had survived, and the Hurricane had been the primary instrument of that survival. The final statistics told a remarkable story. Hurricane squadrons had shot down more enemy aircraft than all other defenses combined. Spitfires claimed approximately 500 kills during the battle. Anti-aircraft guns perhaps 150. The Royal Navy got a handful. Hurricanes accounted for more than 1,300 confirmed destroyed. They'd done this while suffering higher losses than Spitfires, simply because there were more of them and they fought the more dangerous bomber formations. But the Hurricanes' war was far from over. As the Battle of Britain ended, Hurricanes were already spreading across the globe. They fought in North Africa, where they proved superior to Italian fighters. They battled in Burma and Singapore against the Japanese. They served in Russia, where Soviet pilots appreciated their rugged construction and heavy firepower. Everywhere Britain fought, Hurricanes were there. The Middle East campaign showcased the Hurricane's versatility. Squadron leader Marmaduke Paddle, a South African flying with 33 Squadron in Greece, became one of the Commonwealth's highest-scoring aces. Between November 1940 and April 1941, Paddle shot down at least 40 enemy aircraft, all while flying Hurricanes. His tactics were pure aggression. Get close, fire short bursts, confirm the kill, move to the next target. Italian pilots called his squadron the Devil's Hurricanes. Paddle's combat reports were models of efficiency. Attacked 12 Fiat biplanes, shot down 4, out of ammunition. Or intercepted 18 Savoia bombers, destroyed 3. Engine hit, force landed. Paddle was killed in action on April 20th, 1941, defending Athens against overwhelming German numbers. He died doing what he'd always done, attacking regardless of the odds. His hurricane crashed into the sea near Salamis. His body was never recovered, but his legacy lived on in every hurricane pilot who followed. The hurricane proved adaptable to roles nobody had imagined. In North Africa, they carried bombs and attacked German tanks. Hurricanes fitted with 40mm cannon destroyed Rommel's supply trucks by the hundreds. Some versions carried rockets. Others were equipped for night fighting. The basic hurricane design was so robust it could be modified for virtually any task. Sidney Camp's practical engineering paid dividends in ways he never anticipated. The introduction of the Hurricane Mark II in September 1940 brought improved performance. The new Merlin 20 engine produced 1,300 horsepower, giving the Hurricane a top speed of 340 miles per hour. It could climb to 20,000 feet in 8 minutes. Most significantly, some Mark IIs carried 12 machine guns instead of 8. Others mounted 4 20mm cannon. The Hurricane had evolved from fighter to fighter bomber to tank destroyer. Squadron leader James McLaughlin exemplified the Hurricane's evolution. He'd fought in the Battle of Britain with 261 Squadron, shooting down 3 German bombers. In February 1941, fighting over Malta, his Hurricane was hit by return fire from an Italian bomber. Cannon shells shredded his left arm. McLaughlin managed to fly 40 miles back to base and land one-handed. Doctors amputated the arm above the elbow. Most pilots would have accepted medical retirement. McLaughlin demanded to return to combat. He designed his own artificial arm, fitted it with clips to hold the throttle, and learned to fly again. By September 1941, he was back in combat, flying Hurricane fighter bombers against German shipping. He would eventually shoot down 16 enemy aircraft, all but 3 while flying with one arm. He survived being shot down 3 more times. McLaughlin's determination exemplified every Hurricane pilot that ever flew. They didn't accept defeat, ever. The Soviet Union received nearly 3,000 Hurricanes through Lend-Lease. Soviet pilots initially scorned them as inferior to their own fighters. Combat experience changed their minds. The Hurricane's rugged construction proved perfect for Russian conditions. It could operate from rough airstrips. It could take incredible battle damage. And its 8 machine guns were devastating against German bombers on the Eastern Front. Soviet ace Alexei Kalinic flew Hurricanes in 1941 and 42, scoring 9 victories. His assessment was practical. The Hurricane was slower than the Yak-1. It turned worse than the MiG-3, but when you hit something with 8 machine guns, it stayed hit. The Hurricane also never broke down. Russian winter, mud, snow, nothing stopped it. German fighters broke. Russian fighters broke. Hurricanes just kept flying. By 1943, the Hurricane was being replaced by newer fighters in Europe. Spitfires, Typhoons, and American Mustangs took over air superiority missions, but the Hurricane found new life in Asia. Against Japanese fighters like the Zero, the Hurricane's heavy firepower and strong construction proved valuable. The Zero was faster and more maneuverable, but it was also fragile. A short burst from a Hurricane's guns would tear it apart. Flight Lieutenant Frank Carey, who'd fought in the Battle of Britain, was posted to Burma in early 1942. Flying Hurricanes with 17 Squadron, he developed tactics specifically for fighting Zeros. Don't turn with them. Use your diving speed. Attack from above. Fire short bursts. Dive away. Carey shot down 13 Japanese aircraft in 6 weeks before being wounded and invalided home. His tactics became standard for Hurricane pilots in the Far East. The Hurricane's greatest versatility showed in its ground attack role. In North Africa, Hurricane Mark IID variants carried 2 40mm Vickers-S cannon under the wings. These weapons could penetrate the top armor of German tanks. Squadrons of tank-busting Hurricanes hunted Rommel's panzers across the desert. The Germans called them the Flying Can Openers. Squadron leader Neville Duke, who would become one of the RAF's top scorers with 28 victories, flew tank-busting Hurricanes in North Africa. He described the work as terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. You had to come in low and straight. The Jerry Flak gunners knew you were coming. They'd put up a wall of fire, but if you held your nerve and got within 500 yards, those 40mm guns would punch straight through a panzer. I saw tanks literally blown apart. The Hurricane wasn't elegant. It wasn't the fastest or the prettiest, but it was the most effective weapon we had. By 1944, over 14,000 Hurricanes had been built. They'd served with the RAF, Royal Navy, Soviet Air Force, Indian Air Force, Canadian Forces, and numerous other nations. They'd fought on every front where Britain was engaged, and everywhere they went, they established a reputation for ruggedness, reliability, and devastating effectiveness in combat. The Hurricane's final combat missions came in 1944 and 45. By then, newer fighters had taken over most roles, but Hurricanes continued flying in Burma, where they proved perfect for ground attack in jungle conditions. The last Hurricane victory came on July 8, 1945, when a pilot of 11 Squadron shot down a Japanese fighter over Burma. By then, the war in Europe had been over for 2 months. The Hurricane had served from the first day of the war to nearly the last. The statistics of the Hurricane service defy easy comprehension. 2,400 German aircraft destroyed in the Battle of Britain alone. Additional hundreds in North Africa, Russia, Burma, and elsewhere. More enemy aircraft destroyed than any other Allied fighter until the American Mustang surpassed it in 1944. And unlike many high-performance fighters, the Hurricane was forgiving of pilot error. It could be flown by average pilots and still be effective. Sidney Cam had designed it that way deliberately. Post-war assessments acknowledged what had been obvious to pilots all along. The Hurricane won the Battle of Britain, not the glamorous Spitfire, not the brave few. The Hurricane and the men who flew it, they'd done this despite being dismissed as obsolete. Despite German intelligence declaring them inferior, despite supposedly being slower and less capable than enemy fighters, the Hurricane succeeded because it was designed for the actual conditions of combat rather than theoretical performance. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, who commanded Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain, was asked in 1945 which fighter had been more important. His answer was unequivocal. The Hurricane won the Battle of Britain. It was available in greater numbers. It could be repaired more easily. It could be flown by average pilots. And it could destroy any German aircraft with a single burst. The Spitfire was magnificent, but the Hurricane won the battle. German pilots who survived the war were interviewed extensively. Their opinions of British fighters were revealing. They respected the Spitfire as a worthy opponent. They feared the Hurricane as a killer. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, who commanded the Luftwaffe's fighter forces, wrote in his memoirs that the Hurricane was the most underestimated aircraft of the war. We thought it was obsolete. It destroyed over half the aircraft we lost in the Battle of Britain. It was stable, heavily armed, and flown by pilots who would not quit. That combination was far more dangerous than the Spitfire's superior performance. The cost of the Hurricane's success was measured in the men who flew them. During the Battle of Britain alone, over 500 Hurricane pilots were killed or wounded. Many more died in subsequent campaigns. These men came from every corner of Britain and the Commonwealth: England, Scotland, Wales, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Rhodesia, even a few from America who'd volunteered before Pearl Harbor. They flew together, fought together, and too often died together. Their average age was 22. Some were younger. A few were teenagers who'd lied about their age to join up. They flew 4, 5, sometimes 6 sorties a day during the hardest fighting. They fought until their aircraft were shot to pieces or they were too exhausted to continue. Then they climbed into replacement Hurricanes and fought again. No generation before or since has been asked to give so much so young. Squadron leader James Nicholson, who won the Victoria Cross in his burning Hurricane, survived his wounds and returned to combat. He flew Hurricanes in Burma, where he was decorated again for his determination. In May 1945, just days before the war ended, Nicholson was flying as an observer in a Liberator bomber over the Bay of Bengal. The aircraft disappeared. No trace was ever found. Nicholson had survived being burned alive in a hurricane, only to die in sight of final victory. He was 29 years old. Peter Townsend, who'd shot down his first enemy aircraft over Dunkirk, survived the war with 11 confirmed victories. He spent the rest of his life championing the Hurricane's legacy. In a 1975 interview, he reflected on why the Hurricane succeeded. "We didn't fly the Hurricane because it was the best fighter. We flew it because it was there and because it worked. It never let us down. Even when we were outnumbered, even when we were exhausted, the Hurricane kept flying. That's all we needed. A machine that wouldn't quit when we couldn't quit. Today, fewer than 20 hurricanes remain in flying condition worldwide. They appear at air shows, where crowds marvel at their distinctive silhouette, the thick wings, the bubble canopy, the sound of the Merlin engine. Younger generations see an old aircraft. Those who remember see salvation. They see the fighter that held the line when line holding seemed impossible. They see the proof that sometimes grit matters more than glamour. The Battle of Britain Memorial Flight operates 2 airworthy Hurricanes. They fly in formation with a Spitfire and a Lancaster bomber, representing Britain's air war. But it's the Hurricane that draws knowing looks from the older spectators. They remember. They remember the summer when the sky was full of fighters and the fate of civilization hung in the balance. They remember the Hurricane. At the RAF Museum at Hendon, a Hurricane Mark I sits in a place of honor. The placard lists its specifications and service history. But the real story is told by the fabric-covered fuselage, the 8 gun ports in the wings, and the faded squadron markings. This aircraft flew in the Battle of Britain. It survived because some anonymous pilot whose name is lost to history, brought it home despite battle damage. That pilot probably climbed out, watched the ground crew count the holes, and simply walked to the mess for tea. That was the Hurricane spirit. Do your job. Don't make a fuss. Be ready to do it again tomorrow. The Luftwaffe called the Hurricane Britain's worst fighter. They based this on speed charts and performance figures. They ignored what mattered. The Hurricane was there. It was reliable. It was deadly. And it was flown by men who would not accept defeat. The Germans discovered that specifications don't win battles. Determination does. Firepower does. Being willing to fly into overwhelming odds does. The Hurricane had all of that. The specifications were just numbers on paper. In the end, 2,400 enemy aircraft destroyed tell the only story that matters. The Hurricane wasn't the fastest fighter. It wasn't the most glamorous. It was simply the most effective weapon available when Britain needed it most. Sidney Cam designed it. Hawker built it. RAF pilots flew it. Together, they saved Britain. The Hurricane's legacy isn't measured in maximum speed or rate of climb. It's measured in survival. Britain survived. Democracy survived. Freedom survived because the Hurricane was there. Hauptmann Horst Tietzen, who'd watched his wingman disintegrate on September 15, 1940, survived the war. In a 1983 interview, he was asked about his combat experiences. The interviewer noted that Tietzen had flown against Spitfires, Mustangs, and Thunderbolts. Which did he fear most? Tietzen's answer came without hesitation. The Hurricane. Always the Hurricane. The others were faster or more maneuverable. The Hurricane just killed you. Those 8 guns never missed, and the pilots never quit. I was lucky to survive that day in September. My wingman was not. The Hurricane was not the best fighter in the war, but it was the most dangerous one we faced because it was always there, always ready, and always deadly. That was the Hurricane's war. Not flashy, not celebrated, just there when needed, doing the job nobody else could do. The Luftwaffe called it Britain's worst fighter. The men who flew it called it the one that won the battle. History has proven the pilots right. The Hurricane saved Britain. Everything else is just commentary.